Boost your Experian credit score. Boost your score, boost it high, space high. Boost your credit score to space with Experian Boost. Grab that boost high. Boost your credit score instantly for free. Only with Experian. Free Experian account linked to your current account is required. Score increase subject to status.
Hi everyone, Farrah Williams here from Boots, Balls and Bras, and my podcast brought to you by Skoda, the proud sponsors of Chelsea FC Women. It's an incredible time for women's football, and Skoda wants to help you discover the magic of WSL and Chelsea Women. Whether you've never seen a WSL match or you're a seasoned fan. My first experience of watching Chelsea was actually the men's team. Huge Chelsea fan, lived across the bridge in Battersea, and so used to go there all the time. And actually a small advertisement in that programme led me to play for Chelsea as a youth player. So jump in and experience the excitement of WSL for yourself. Visit skoda.co.uk and learn more about Skoda's Chelsea Women's Partnership and cars.
This is The Guardian. Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Chelsea's perfect start to the season continues with another 5-star performance, while City stayed top after reaching their 200th Barclays WSL win. Russo returns to haunt her former club, but super sub Malard earns Manchester United a point. Elsewhere, Liverpool, Tottenham and Brighton get back to winning ways, and we'll delve into the details of the league's record-breaking broadcast deal. All that, plus we'll take your questions. And that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Suzanne Wrack, how have you been? What was your favourite thing from the weekend?
Not the football. But, you know, nice to have all the games on a Sunday and, you know, not have to do anything on a Saturday, which was great. And I took my son to the London card show so he could buy Pokemon cards, and I bought a signed Etana Bonmati trading card, which was cool.
I love that. That's brilliant. It doesn't always have to be football. We do have to have a life outside of the football sometimes.
I mean, I turned it into football, but, you know.
Well, I mean, of course you did. Of course you did. But, you know, there are layers to football. Tim Stillman, double Arsenal day today. Have you thought about anything apart from the football?
No, not really. Last week I was in Preston on Wednesday, Newcastle on Saturday, Leeds Sports Village on Sunday. Managed to squeeze in a visit to my mum's in Brighton on Thursday and Friday because of half term. My daughter, so my feet haven't touched the ground, but you know, I've got good momentum behind me. Put it that way.
You have indeed. And Sophie Downey, it's always football for you, but the hats are back again. Canada reigns supreme.
Always. The Canada hat is back. It's hit winter in my book anyway. I know it's still autumn, but it's too cold for me, so the hat is back.
I know, I can see the throw behind your sofa as well, and I'm thinking, I need to get a throw in my booth, in my recording booth. It's not very cosy in here. It looks like a sauna, very randomly. Feels like it at times as well, which will be nice in the summer.
I wondered if the Canada hat was a tribute to Christine Sinclair, but it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, totally. No, I lived in Canada for a while, not Christine Sinclair related, unfortunately.
We gave her lots of love the other week on the pod, didn't we? Right, let's start in Manchester, shall we? It was billed to be the game of the weekend, and Mark Skinner marked his 100th game in charge as his unbeaten Manchester United side hosted 5th place Arsenal at Leeds Sports Village. It finished Manchester United 1, Arsenal 1, so United stay unbeaten. Melvine Malard's late equaliser cancelled out Alessia Russo's opener. Arsenal were on top of the match for most of it, Susie, as well. What did you make of their performance, though? Did the game itself live up to expectations?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the same old, right? Like, it's, you know, a testament to the fact that not everything changes overnight when you change a manager. You know, so many chances created, like it's 19 shots to 6, only 4 shots on target to 3, 7 block shots to 1. Like, they should have like comfortably won this game but didn't, and like that lack of ruthlessness in the final third I think is really frustrating, especially when that's like the focus of what they talked about like after the international break. It's like I said afterwards, we came back from this international break and had a meeting with the players. We talked about intensity, ruthlessness in the box, communication, and we could see that was all good on the pitch today. No, it wasn't. Yes, communication and intensity and stuff, like it was a strong performance, but that ruthlessness is and has been the missing piece for quite some time. And I don't know why or how they find that, because it feels like, it's, not something that you can necessarily coach. I don't know. It's frustrating.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, Tim, because we did find out on Friday that Renee Slegers is going to remain in charge as interim manager for their next 5 fixtures, whether or not that is a good thing or not. But let's talk about the game for now. You said pre-match that Manchester United's press could potentially be difficult to manage for Arsenal. How did they manage it? And do you think, bearing in mind the dominance that Arsenal had, you view it as 2 points dropped rather than a point gained?
Absolutely 2 points dropped. I think this was the worst I'd felt after a game this season for Arsenal. And my first question to Renee, actually, I said, I'm going to ask you this almost more as a fan than a journalist, but I said I found it immensely frustrating that Arsenal dominated that much. The United press was kind of non-existent, to be honest. I think they were opened up quite easily the last time they played Arsenal. They were a bit too adventurous, and I think they overcorrected slightly, and they were quite conservative, and Arsenal made a change at half-time. And one of the things Renee said about the change she made at half-time, she said, we felt the defensive details were there, which I think was kind of a nice way of saying we weren't really concerned about what was coming in the other direction. And when I watched the game back, Daphne van Domselaar touches the ball in the second half for the first time in the 76th minute, and that was a back pass from Leah Williamson. She did not touch the ball for 31 minutes. United did not enter the last 30 yards of the pitch. That tells you about Arsenal's dominance. But to Susie's point, this is very, very, very far from a one-off for Arsenal. They've got 7 goals from 10.5 XG this year. They are one of only 2 WSL teams to underperform their XG last year. That ruthlessness, that lack of ruthlessness, turning dominance into goals is their biggest issue by a million miles. And to Susie's point, I don't know if that's a coaching issue or a personnel issue, but it's definitely, for me, it's going to be number one, the highest priority on the new coach's list to try and sort that out. Because without that, Arsenal are a title challenging team. Whatever you think about the way they perform, they generate enough to score enough goals to challenge for the title, and they're not doing it at the moment.
No, they're not. One of those issues, though, has been being clinical in front of goal. We've said that Alessia Russo-Soph hasn't been at her best, but she did get her goal, which is really key for her confidence and going forward. But bearing in mind everything that Tim and Susie have said there, is it too simplistic to think that the tide is turning for her, or could this be the momentum that at least she, if not the rest of the team, need?
I think she had a really good international break as well. She looked really positive, really creative, quite free as well with England. And while maybe the goals didn't come in that, completely come in that international break, I think it was a really positive turn for her. I do think sometimes we forget about Alessia Russo's attributes sometimes. I think everyone wants her to be a 20-goal-a-season striker. I'm not quite sure she ever will be, and that's not any kind of disrespect to her. I just think the type of game that she has, she's not an out-and-out number 9. She loves to drop deep. She loves to come and get the ball and influence the play from deeper positions. So I've been really impressed with her performances while the goal hasn't come. I think it's sometimes with Arsenal, it doesn't really always suit her play, just trying to... I feel like sometimes she's pinned in the box. And not really expected to come deep, or really they're accommodating her to come deep all that much. So I think she had a really good performance against United. Of course, it was going to be her. She looked back to her kind of best. But Manchester United seem to have this theme this season where former strikers are coming back to haunt them. You had Nikita Parris in the last game and Alessia Russo this round. But I'm really hoping it's a platform for her to build off for the next few months.
Yeah, and Manchester United have had their problems this season, and Mark Skinner was very honest after the match about the fact his side were lucky to come away with a point. This is what he had to say. I'd probably say they feel like they should have won the game, and that's on them, but they didn't. And you've got to take the point where you take the point. We weren't at our best today, but I'm really happy that we've taken the point. Were you surprised, Susie, about how difficult United found it?
I wasn't necessarily surprised by how difficult they found it, in that we know that Arsenal are good at dominating. I suppose, I was surprised by the Man United performance in that, we've seen them play so well this season, generally speaking, and they looked, totally off pace. And I think Tim's point about them sort of overcompensating for previous fixtures, makes a lot of sense for how they were set up in those games. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're very, very fortunate to have got a point at the end of that. In a way, I think that's in part down to the performances of Millie Turner in particular, but May Letizia as well at the back. I thought they were very, very, very good.
Let's wrap this up, Tim, with what I mentioned earlier on about Renée Slegers, because, she is going to be remaining in charge for the next 5 games. What do you think of that decision? How much progress has actually been made in terms of finding a permanent replacement? Could she do the job, or is it just, as you mentioned earlier on, effectively replacing Jonas with someone who's worked alongside Jonas, and therefore that's not going to really change or improve much for Arsenal? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a timeline thing, really. I think essentially... I heard Nick Cushing's name the day Jonas resigned. Quite frankly, I haven't heard any other names since. And this is kind of me putting 2 and 2 together, but I get the sense that's what they're waiting for. And that's why there's quite a definite timeline. I suspect that Arsenal were kind of trying to keep things going with Jonas until the manager they really want long-term is available. And Jonas resigned and cut the cord, and so they've got this interim situation with Renée Slegers, which, long term, she's worked with Jonas twice before, so there's obviously a lot of continuity. I do think one clever thing she has done, which both as an interim makes sense for her, but also her previous role as an assistant was very much one-on-one coaching with the players. So she very much sat with the players, went through their clips and coached them individually. And she's talked a lot about getting the players and saying, right, what do you think the problems are? How do you want to play? What do you think we need to fix a little bit? And I think when the belief is broken in the group a little bit, like it has been at the beginning of this season, as a short-term interim solution, that makes a lot of sense to bring the players back to the group and builds on her strengths with her individual relationships with the players. But obviously that's a short-term solution, and long term what needs to happen, I think, is new voice, probably new ideas, and a philosophy coach to come in and really build in a style of play. But I think Renée, as she understands she's an interim, and I think she's doing some quite good interim things, if that makes sense, because you don't have the authority all the time to make huge sweeping changes. So she has made some little changes which I think make some sense in her position.
What are we thinking, Soph, about Nick Cushing? I mean, he's at New York City FC in Major League Soccer in the US. So he's been, obviously former Manchester City boss, but he's been in the men's game for the last couple of years. What do you make of him being the potential replacement? And is there any kind of timeline in place?
I was honestly a little bit surprised when I first heard his name. I heard it pretty early on as well, like Tim did. Because I hadn't heard his name within women's football realms for quite a while, since he left Manchester City, really. I thought he was pretty settled in the MLS. But I read Susie's article with Nikita Parris, who was full of praise for Nick Cushing about the coach that he was. And I know he did get the best out of some of his players. And Nikita Parris has said that she hadn't had a coach before Dario like Nick Cushing before. So there's a huge amount of praise there. He's definitely got the platform in the women's game, I guess, from his time back in Manchester City. He is very much from the City Group realm of coaching, though. So it's going to be interesting to see how he breaks out of that, if he does. But yes, time frame, I mean, like Tim says, I think it probably now fits with the kind of MLS season playoff. I am surprised that it's pretty much been the only name I've heard of like being considered. I thought there were a few others around that might being looked at. But yeah, no, Arsenal seem pretty set on it at the moment.
Yep, they do. And of course, it was Gareth Taylor, currently Manchester City boss, who took over from Nick Cushing when he left. And City got their 200th win in the Barclays Women's Super League against Crystal Palace. It finished Palace 0, Manchester City 3 at the weekend. Jess Park broke down Palace's resistance just before the break. Jill Roord and Bunny Shaw also on the score sheet. But Gareth Taylor did say City also not at their best. Is anybody at their best this season? Especially given, the quick turnaround that we've seen after the international break. What did you make of their performance, Tim?
Yeah, they weren't at their best, but at the same time, I think sometimes one of the things Emma Hayes did really well in this league actually is sometimes just take the points and don't worry too much about the performance. If you've got a big block of games, and City will have been looking at this and thinking, we should probably be able to win this in second gear. We've got Champions League games coming up, etc., etc. So I do think sometimes you do have to do that in a long season. But I think really a couple of things stood out for me for City. I mean, they had 80% possession, 23 shots. I mean, even if we're saying they're not at their best, this was a consummate 3-0 win. But I think the fact they got some young players on towards the end as well really pointed to that. So Blinkilda Brown, Murphy, Pryor all coming on. But for me, what really caught the eye was the Jill Roord goal in this game. That is exactly the goal I think Gareth Taylor envisaged when they brought her in. A cross comes in, all of the defenders are attracted to Bunny Shaw, it breaks to Jill Roord and she's free because all of the defenders have understandably gone to Bunny Shaw. I think that's exactly what Man City will have bought her for, and obviously we haven't seen that due to her injury. But yeah, I think this was very much a case of City probably privately thinking we can probably win this at 80% and leave a little bit in the tank for other games coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Jill Roord there because news came out last week that Vivian Miedemar's undergone knee surgery, so she's going to be on the sidelines for a little while, which is a big blow, Susie, but Jill Roord is that ready-made replacement and she's hit the ground running already, which probably for Gareth Taylor actually, means a little bit of a selection headache when they're both fit.
Because how you fit them in the team, it would be quite difficult, particularly with Bunny Shaw. But that's the bonus of playing in 4 competitions, right? Like they've got games, they're going to need to rotate. Miedemar's clearly not been right since her ACL injury, problems on and off since then. Obviously had another surgery now. We don't know exactly what it's for. They've not revealed that information. So yeah, I mean, it's highly likely that she's going to be out for a period of time. Jill Roord has only just come back. Her form has been brilliant on her return, but, that's not necessarily going to last. Chloe Kelly obviously came back from an ACL injury just before the Euros, had a really, really rapid return and really impressive, kind of start to life at City after her ACL injury. So, we know that, that is possible, but it doesn't necessarily last. She struggled for form of late, she struggled for minutes of late. And, there can be significant long-term knock-on issues around ACL injuries. The fact that you've got those 2 players both returning from that, the ability to be able to sort of swap them in and out, I think is going to be really, really important. And even if that wasn't the case, the fact that you've got 4 competitions, you're going to need to be able to rotate, whether that's, Miedemar coming in for Bunny Shaw or Roord coming in for Miedemar in the 10, whatever that may be. There's so many different variants that they can go for now. Hemp playing through the middle, either of those players behind. I don't think it will ever be much of a selection headache because whether they're both fit is the big question.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and actually sad when you say it like that. In many ways, that you can't have a team with them both in it because of fitness issues. Man City still a point clear at the top of the table. Chelsea do have that game in hand though, but City really showing their credentials in terms of the title race so far, albeit early days. But what about Palace, Soph? I mean, they worked pretty hard, didn't they? Came up with a couple of chances, not the scoreline that they would have wanted, but how much can they take for that performance?
I think they're making progress. I think that's clear to see. I think I spoke to Laura Kaminsky afterwards, and she was very positive about it. I mean, obviously, you probably go into that game not really, she'll never say it, but not really expecting to get much out of it. But the fact that they held it to 3-0 was really important. You know, we just think a few weeks back where they went 7-0 to Chelsea and it sort of fell apart in their second half. And it never really felt like it was falling apart. They battled really, really hard for that first 40 minutes until Jess Park's goal. They had like 3 at the back, so they were defending really, really well as well. They were working really hard for each other. And it was kind of that moment of magic from Jess Park that really kind of broke them down. Yes, City had chances. They were dominating the ball, but they were kind of limiting their opportunities. So Jess Park needed a bit of brilliance from distance to kind of unlock the whole thing, I think. And the goal came at the right time as well, right, for Manchester City. 40th minute, just before the break. That changes things completely. In the second half, they had their chances as well. Palace, they started really trying to attack. Katie Stengel hit the post. Molly Mayshott came on as a sub and produced a really good save from Keating as well. So I think there'll be positives to take. There'll be things to build off. They've got Everton next. So I think they'll go into that one feeling pretty confident in themselves. I think they have outperformed what probably most of us thought they would do in this early stage of the season. They've got a win, they've got a draw, and they look pretty good at competing right now.
Yeah, they did, actually. Scoreline doesn't look great, as you say, but, still a decent performance, I would say. A decent performance from all of you as well for part 1. In part 2, we'll look at the remaining WSL fixtures, give you the latest from the Championship and the Adobe Women's FA Cup, and we'll recap a busy end to the international break. Welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Right, next to champions Chelsea, who gave Everton a night to forget at Goodison Park. Just as well we didn't have Marva Creel on today. That just would have been cruel, wouldn't it? It finished Everton 0, Chelsea 5. Aggie Beaver-Jones, Erin Cuthbert, Guru Wrighton made it 3-0 before half-time, and then late goals from Vika Captain and Ashley Lawrence made the victory pretty comprehensive in the end. 5 wins from 5 in a 5-0 win for Sonia Bonpastor. A 5-star performance, and her side are really racking up the goals. It's a 9+ goal difference over Manchester City that they've got. I mentioned that game in hand earlier on as well. But how important is it to open up that kind of gap at this point, Susie, given we know what happened last season in terms of goal difference? And also, big shout out to Chelsea in terms of the goals are coming from all over the pitch, not just 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, a goal difference gap is good if you can maintain it, right, and extend it, because we saw at the end of last season how easy it is in the WSL to overturn large goal difference margins. I think it was a 8 or 9 goal gap between City and Chelsea at one point that Chelsea turned around in the space of 2 or 3 games. So, like, they're very easy to turn around if you get a decent run of games against, particularly low table opposition. But if they can build on it, if they can, kind of keep extending it between now and the end of the season, then they can make it an insurmountable mountain. The goals coming from all over the team, again, hugely impressive. Like, they're kind of so fluid in attack, so interchangeable, which is nice. But the thing that impressed me most in this was the performances of Sandy Baltimore and Ashley Lawrence out wide. Like, I thought they were super effective, and they really seem to be finding their feet in the Chelsea side and the structure that Bonpastor wants them to play in. Like, it just, that all feels to be clicking a little bit more than it did in the first few games. So yeah, like, I was hugely impressed with them. Obviously, a lot of goals coming in from their delivery. So yeah, like, hugely impressive performance. Great to get different goal scorers on the score sheet, but I think that was partly because they were getting balls in from wide areas that were setting up some of the sort of central players really, really nicely.
Tim, we mentioned Manchester City's selection headache potential going forward, but Chelsea's going to have one. I mean, they usually have one anyway, don't they? But something big for Sonia Bonpastor to have to deal with, because her squad is absolutely stacked. Sam Kerr and Mia Fishel look like they're on the way back, and Aggie Beaver-Jones got only her second start of the season and made her mark, scoring the opening goal. It's going to be difficult to juggle, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah. There's a stat, I think, that Chelsea have 13 different goal scorers this season, and no one else in the WSL has 12 goals.
Wow.
They've literally got more goal scorers than everyone else has goals. I have to say, I think that will correct a little bit. Like, some of that is kind of purple patch stuff. They've almost doubled their XG. I do expect that to come down slightly, not enough that I think any particular trouble is coming to them. But I think what's been really impressive about this from Sonia Bonpastor is this is a Chelsea side that's turned over a bit in the last year. They've brought the average age right back down of the squad. They've brought in a lot of new players in over the last couple of years. So she didn't take over a really settled team, I don't think. And so to be able to do this and have this start, and I still think they have some like very fixable issues, but if you're winning games 5 and 6-0 when you've got some fixable issues, that's quite a good position to be in. And yeah, I think it's looking quite ominous, to be honest, because as much as I said, I think the XG, for example, might course correct a little bit. I mean, they're going to bring Sam Kerr back at some stage, and then it will probably go back to where it is. So yeah, I think they look very, very ominous, I have to say.
Yeah, clean sheet for Hannah Hampton as well. Big shout out for her and a little bit of love, Soph, because she became the youngest goalkeeper to reach 100 WSL appearances, aged 23 years and 353 days. Her birthday is imminent, but 23 years old.
I think I've been really impressed by Hannah Hampton. I think, there was a whole lot of discussion when she joined Chelsea about how she would kind of settle into the team and how she would whether she would even get played, whether she'd go out on loan, all of this kind of stuff, because Chelsea was stacked for keepers. They've always been stacked for keepers. And she came in at a time where you had Ann-Katrin Berger and Zecira Musovic ahead of her. But she's really made that starting place at Chelsea her own at the turn of the year this year, but also in this season under Sonia. And I think you can tell a real maturity under her. I think she has matured a lot. I think she's really now in line as well on an international stage to be England number 1 by the next summer. I think you can tell with her game that she's breeding confidence as well. Sometimes I think, her key strength is distribution, I think, and sometimes it goes a bit awry when she gets a bit stressed. But I think overall, it's a really impressive contribution, the fact that she's reached that mark so young. We've had quite a few of these kind of landmarks being reached by really young players, and I think it just shows the progress of the kind of development of young talent in the league.
Yeah, I agree with you. Quick focus on Everton, Susie. It's looking a little bit desperate already, which I hate saying early on in the season because we know how things can turn around, but they are propping up the table as it stands. They're on the same points as West Ham and Aston Villa though, but that negative goal difference is starting to build up a little bit. These are the thoughts of captain Megan Finnegan speaking on Sky Sports after the game. The club situation right now obviously isn't ideal. That's impacting the women's side in some ways. Once the new ownership comes through, hopefully we can start seeing changes for the better, because this league is ever growing. The league's growing fast, and that's why the standard's so high. Everton Football Club cannot be left behind. That's really important, that message. It's worrying, isn't it, for Everton at the moment, for the women's team in particular, Susie?
Very, and they are being left behind, and they've been really unlucky as well. Like the number of injuries they've already got this season, like extending the problem that they had last season with injuries is just so unfortunate when you've got such a tight squad and very little to work with. But they'll be ruining some of the defensive errors for a couple of the Chelsea goals at least, like the Erin Cuthbert one and the weaker captain one in particular. Like they shouldn't be giving the ball away to Cuthbert in that position, and B, like the way they were set up around the weaker captain goal was just really like they were just ball watching really. And, so things like that will be disappointing. They won't expect to get points off of Chelsea, let's face it. But they've not got a win yet. They need to be doing better against the teams around them. And they're not at the moment. And you can't really see a way out for them, given, the personnel they've got available at the moment, the way they're playing, the number of... their heads look down, right? Like, it doesn't look like they're going to pick it up. So... they really, really need some money in January to inject some life and soul into the team. But it's, a pretty unattractive prospect for any new player coming in as well.
Can I add on Everton? I mean, I think it was clear from the close of the transfer window they were going to have a lot of work to do in January. They've scored 1 goal this season and it was an own goal. And they have had injuries, but I think that's probably a consequence of having such a small squad. And Brian Sorensen pointed afterwards to the fact they conceded goals at the end of the first half and at the end of the second half. And he said that was probably down to lack of energy because of the small squad. And they lose Sarah Hornsgaard before the game. They have to start Izzy Hobson, who's 17 at centre-back. Like, they need 3-4 players in January minimum.
Yeah. January is going to be key for quite a few clubs, isn't it? I wouldn't think so for Brighton, though. They did all their business in the summer. Brighton won, Leicester City 0 is how it finished. And an in-form Nikita Parris on the score sheet yet again. That was her 3rd goal in as many games. She looks like she's really flourishing in her new home at the moment, Soph, doesn't she?
She does. She's playing with a smile on her face, and that's absolutely key for Nikita Parris. When she's smiling, it's kind of infectious, and I think it goes through the whole team as well. When you have a happy Nikita Parris up front, it's not just her that gets affected by it, it's everyone around her, because she is that bubbly kind of focal point as well. And I think she's got a really good leadership style as well. She's one of the senior members in the squad now. She's 30 years old, so she's got so much experience behind her. She's been abroad as well, and she just looks like she's really content.
Do you think her form's good enough for potential England call-up again, a recall? It's been a while since she's been in the squad.
I think she's certainly playing well enough to get noticed. I do think time is against her a bit. And I think when you look at the England squad and kind of the forwards that they have, yes, they sometimes really need that kind of number 9. But you're looking at, Jess Naz and Aggie Beaver-Jones coming through, and they're performing pretty well, especially Jess got her first start for England against South Africa, so she's obviously doing well in training. Aggie is performing for Chelsea as well, so she has got competition from those coming through, and that makes it even harder, I think, when you are at the latter end of your career to really get back into the fold. But keep scoring goals and who knows what can happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. Dario Vizicic has been praised from all quarters for the progress his side has made. He picked up the WSL October Manager of the Month award as well. Very well deserved. They face Arsenal next Friday, though, Tim. Or this Friday, as it is. This Friday coming. How big a test is that going to be? And will it be a good measure of whether or not they can sustain their progress?
Absolutely. They're 4 points ahead of Arsenal. Any kind of result for them in this game keeps Arsenal at arm's length. And then you start to have the discussion about whether Brighton can be that team this season that maybe Liverpool were last season and Villa were the season before that. And yeah, they're very, very brave in the way they play. Nobody has more touches in their own defensive third than Brighton. That tells you a lot about how brave they are. And actually, one of the things that Vadicic said over the summer was that he wants to do that against the big teams as well. And that's going to be a real big test for them. We saw them do it against United, but coming to the Emirates, I fully expect them to do that again and be brave and play out from the back. But it'll be interesting against a team like Arsenal, who do, for some of their attacking faults, have some really physical players who are very good at pressing. I'm sure Arsenal will target that. But what they've got going for them, I think they did some smart business in bringing in Fran Kirby, Nikita Parris. They already had Vicky Losada there. That's a lot of WSL and European experience in there. And I think they did some really, really good business over the summer. And they do look like they could be that disruptor team this year.
Yeah, they do, which is exciting. Unfortunately for Leicester, I don't think they are going to be that disruptor team. Really struggling at the moment. And before I go into what happened at the weekend, I just want to read out an email that we had from Tamsin Slater. First of all, I want to apologise to Tamsin because we did get a couple of facts about Leicester wrong in a pod that we did a couple of weeks ago. So apologies for that. But this is what Tamsin had to say. I listen to your podcast every week. I started following the WSL last year after the World Cup. So I was keen to learn and find sources of information. I could have chosen a glamour club to support, but I chose Leicester. as they're the most local to me, but I still have to travel over an hour to get to games. I appreciate there's less interest in Leicester than some of the bigger clubs, but every week we're bottom of the roundup pile. Not this week. We made sure you weren't, but unfortunately it was still a defeat for you. But she makes a good point. We're another team in transition with a new manager. Come through a lot of turbulence last year with the Willie Kirk sacking, and we have an injury crisis in our forward line, but our defence is really standing strong, which is worth a mention. And actually, just conceding the 1 goal against Brighton is pretty impressive. She finishes off, I get it, the big teams are where the majority of the interest is, but please look a little bit further up the M1 than just North London. We're all in this to grow the game, and that includes the less glamorous teams too. Thank you for your message, Tamsin. And yeah, absolutely, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of the questions that we get in tend to be on the bigger clubs as well. But you're right, we do need to focus on the so-called smaller clubs, and I don't want to call you that either. But it is a struggle at the moment, Susie, isn't it, for Leicester and for Amandine Mikel. 3rd defeat of the season, but they've got loads of injuries, as Tamsin mentioned. New forward Naomi Mouchon, she's been ruled out for the season with an ACL injury. Lena Peterman's also been sidelined with a knee issue. It means, obviously, they've had to juggle the front line a fair bit. Ruby Mace playing up there against Everton, Janice Cayman playing there in this game. And then Sam Tierney was stretchered off in this match as well. 1 shot on target. It's been a difficult season for them, but there are extenuating circumstances, Susie.
Yeah, there are, and it's how they manage and deal with those circumstances that will be the test of Amandine Mikel in this time, and then how supported they are around the January transfer window at filling the gaps they've got because of these injuries, right? Like a 1-0 loss to Brighton in the form that Brighton are in is like nothing to be sniffed at. I mean, it is really hard, in terms of coverage, because I would love for us to cover every team in the WSL equally, both, in written as well as podcasts and things like that. But it's, the match of the day problem, right? Like, you have to pick teams to go top of the list when you're recording a podcast, and that often ends up being the ones in the title race just by default, particularly when there's big games like, Man United v Arsenal and stuff going on. But one of the joys that I've had from the start of this season in having Tom Gary come in from a written perspective is that we're able to get to more games between us, which means we see more of teams outside the top 4 that you sort of just automatically get drawn into covering, because that's where a lot of the kind of big attention is. But yeah, being able to cover those teams in more detail is always an aim, right? That's where we want to get to, a point where they're all getting equal coverage, a point where they've all got brilliant local club specific journalists like Tim, right? Doing brilliant work that we're not always able to do, that real in-depth tactical analysis and day-to-day stuff. So yeah, completely fair comments that they don't get enough of an airing, and I think the same could be said for a lot of the other teams like Palace and Brighton, Everton, and yeah, we should make a concerted effort to try and get one of them a little bit more heavily featured maybe every week.
Yep, and don't you worry, Guardian Women's Football Weekly fans, we are pushing behind the scenes. There is so much work going on behind the scenes that I wish you could see of us trying to get more coverage. But keep your emails coming into us, because we really appreciate reading them. Women's Football Weekly at theguardian.com is the email address. Tottenham registered their first win since the opening day of the season. They came from behind to beat London rivals West Ham. It finished Tottenham 2, West Ham 1. Rico Wecky sending the Hammers ahead, but an equaliser from Bethany England and then a 92nd minute own goal from Camilla Size sealed the 3 points for the hosts. Well, not the prettiest of victories, Tim, was it? But still pretty important for Robert Villaham's side in terms of having a platform to build off. Give Spurs some love, you gooner.
Thanks for that. This was an incredibly important win for them, because their next 2 games are Man City away and Arsenal at home. So look, I'm not going to sit here and say that they won't beat Arsenal, because I remember what happened last season, but they're looking at the fact that they might get 0 points in the next 2 games. So to not have won this would have been pretty disastrous for them, and to concede from another set piece as well. I think they've got a bit of a frailty there. Perhaps they'll have a new goalkeeper in January that might help with some of that. But yeah, I mean, they kind of got away with one by getting a pretty comical own goal in the last minute. And Saez, who scores the own goal, is actually Everton's only goal scorer this season because she scored an own goal against Everton. So, I couldn't really make sense of what was going on with that. But yeah, I think there were some green shoots here. Like Spurs, they're good. Their attacking numbers are good. They're fourth in the WSL for XG. They brought in Ella Morris in this game, and I think they've really been missing Grace Clinton. They haven't really been able to replace what she gave them last season. And Robert Villaham talked about Ella Morris kind of driving with the ball and being proactive, and that's the stuff they lost with Grace Clinton. But yeah, they kind of got away with one with the nature of the winning goal, and they really, really needed to with what they've got coming up, both in terms of the points they might get, but also just building a little bit of confidence.
Any green shoots for West Ham, Sophie? Still not got their first win of the season, really struggling, and the own goal obviously will have been a sucker punch.
They have moments in performances in games where the performance is there, and I think they showed it against Manchester United as well in their opener in the season. They have these moments where they can put on pressure, but I just don't see it consistently enough, and all too often they concede really bad times or really silly goals, and that is just like piling up the pressure, I think. I think it is a worry for Rianne Skinner at the moment. I know she will always say that, they're putting in the numbers, they're all of the stats, when they look at them in training, they're improving throughout the pitch, but at some point you really need to turn that into results. And, they are looking at the moment like they're going to be in a relegation fight, and you can't just hope that someone's going to be worse than you every year. You've got to start making the improvements, and the thing is, they invested really well, especially in January. They brought in some really big experience in Katrina Gorey, and they do have good players, but it's just trying to pin all the pieces together, which isn't quite working at the moment. I will just say I do feel really, really bad for Camilla Seiss, because she's new to the league, and that is one really, really bad opening few games for her, a baptism of fire, I guess, as well. And it would have been a spectacular goal down the other end of the pitch. I don't really know what she was doing, but yeah, I just feel really bad for her, because that can't be helping with her confidence, and it can't be helping with the team's confidence either.
No, another team low on confidence, Aston Villa. They lost by 2-1 at home to Liverpool. It's really increasing the pressure in Birmingham on Robert DePau. He changed his system in the first half, but meant that they really struggled. Taylor Hines then capped off a brilliant fortnight with a brace for Liverpool, but Villa reverted back to normal in the second half and pulled one back through Gabby Nunes, but ultimately couldn't salvage any points. Let's focus with the positives from a Liverpool perspective, Susie, first of all. Unbeaten run on the road, stretching to 8 games now. They're 6th in the table. That and the performance of Taylor Hines, I'm sure, will have pleased Matt Beard.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think having another player providing goals, like they were so reliant on, kind of just one or two last season, that they really, really, really needed to expand on that this season. The fact that Hobinger's got 2, Capoch has got 2, Olivia Smith has got 2, now Taylor Hines has got 2, Sophie Roman-Haug's only got 1. They're spreading it out that little bit further, that I think will be a bigger advantage this season if they can sort of maintain that, because they've not had a huge turnover. They didn't spend that big in the summer. Their budget is quite small, relatively speaking, to the other clubs sort of around, where they are sort of competing just outside the top 4. So yeah, good sides, but not necessarily as straightforward for them as it was last season.
Yeah, it's not been straightforward for Robert DePau, Tim, though. He's cut a frustrated figure again. That new formation just didn't work in the first half, but I suppose he had to try something.
Yeah, definitely. And he makes a triple substitution at half time. And he talked afterwards about how Villa are just starting games very badly. And, I think it was put to him, but the response was good. And he just said in a very frustrated way, the response is always good, but we have to keep starting better. And it makes me wonder whether or how the message is getting through to some of the players when you're changing formation, making triple substitutions at half time. That doesn't smell good to me. And I just think with Villa overall, Rachel Daly's got 3 goals, one of them a penalty. Nunes now has 2. Adriana Leon has 1. Jordan Nobbs, Kirsty Hansen, Kenza Darley, Katie Robinson, Missy Beaukearns, Ebony Salmon, none of them have scored this season. I look at that Villa squad and I see goals, but I watch Villa and I don't see goals, basically. And that's quite a surprise, actually, because I look at Villa and think maybe they look a bit top heavy, if anything. But yeah, it just feels like they haven't really clicked with what he's asking them to do yet, which is a surprise because I watched them on the opening day against Chelsea and thought they looked very good. But since then, there's just something not right there.
No, there isn't, but hopefully they can turn it around. Villa fans, let us know what you think. How is it watching your side every week? What is going wrong? Is it something behind the scenes? Something that we're maybe missing? Let us know your thoughts. Right, the Championship, we say it almost every single week, but the Barclays Championship does continue to deliver, doesn't it? It's absolutely brilliant. London City Lionesses drew themselves level with Birmingham City at the top of the table after a 1-0 win over Sheffield United. Birmingham, though, lost 2-0 at home to Newcastle United, thanks to goals from Shania Hales and Isabella Sibley. Durham kept up the chase with a 3-2 win over Blackburn Rovers. Charlton's 1-0 defeat to Southampton, though, saw them drop down to 5th. Finally, Sunderland stunned Bristol City in a 7-goal thriller. Just 3 points separate positions 1 to 6 as the battle for promotion starts to take shape. Portsmouth, though, continue to struggle at the bottom. Blackburn and Sheffield United remain in touching distance, though. It is the gift that keeps on giving, the Championship. Any Championship fans out there who want to let us know what it's like from their team's perspective, please do. Last week we previewed the second legs of the Euro 2025 Round 1 playoffs as well. It was a successful night for the home nations, you'll be pleased to hear. All 3 came through unscathed and progress. Comfortable for Scotland, they registered a 4-0 victory at home to Hungary and set up a Round 2 encounter with Finland. Dramatic scorelines elsewhere, though. Northern Ireland needed a 114th minute strike from Lauren Wade to beat Croatia. They've got a really tough encounter with Norway coming next. Kerry Holland scored in the 112th minute to make sure that Wales got past Slovakia. They've got a mouth-watering tie with Republic of Ireland, who beat Georgia 9-0 on aggregate. It was a positive night all round, Sophie.
It was. I think to get all 3 through to the Round 2 is absolutely key. I do think a couple will have a stumbling blocks in the next round of playoffs. I think Wales, Ireland, obviously that's going to catch the eye. Republic of Ireland, that's going to catch the eye. Northern Ireland with Norway, that's going to be really, really tricky. They're up against it in that one. And I do think Scotland could have a problem in Finland. They have a really age-old history of facing each other and kind of being disappointed at times. So that's going to be a tricky one as well for Scotland. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the Round 2 in November. But yeah, the fact that all through have got through and, are facing, as a place in the Euro 2025, that's pretty positive.
Yeah, really positive, exciting as well. England also rounded off their international window with a 2-1 friendly win over South Africa. Brilliant email from Mads, who messaged us to say, listening to yesterday's pod and wondering if perhaps Serena Wiegmann wanted to play her cards close to her chest and not play her new players against Germany, one of the big rivals in the Euros. Could that be a strategy to make her team more unpredictable next summer? Susie, what say you from Mads, the pod fan?
I mean, it's a great theory. I like the idea of it. It makes everything a little bit like all the sort of not amazing performances look that little bit nicer if you look at it through that lens. I think it's unlikely that you wouldn't sort of play to compete and test yourself, whilst not wanting to give a huge amount away to your opposition about sort of the way you're going to look in the summer. I think it'd be really unlikely if you didn't sort of go full throttle for those games. So I don't think it's that. I think it was they made a choice for those two games and went for experience over youth for a team like Germany and a game at Wembley, and then, you know, kind of consciously pivoted a little bit more for the South Africa game with the pressure and that little bit off. Whether that's the right decision or not, like, I don't know. But that, like, I would suggest that is more likely the answer. But, like, I like these different ideas about why it could have been done the way it has been done.
Me too. Thank you, Mads. Right, the first round of the Adobe Women's FA Cup took place on Sunday. 58 ties across the country. Tier 5 side South Shield shocked FA Women's National League Northern Premier side Halifax with a penalty shootout victory. Saltdean United made history with a 2-1 win over South London. Natasha Thomas scored 5 as Ipswich Town beat MK Dons 12-0. Blimey, we don't see those scorelines that often anymore, do we? Burnley also cruised through against Spennymoor Town with the same scoreline. Watford beat fellow FA Women's National League Premier Division side AFC Wimbledon, and Lewis beat Dulwich Hamlet on penalties. The second round is going to take place on the 24th of November. Oxford United host Watford in one of the standout ties. A couple of quick questions for you. Nag has asked on X, when will the prize money within the Women's FA Cup be distributed more fairly? No increase from last year's figures. Teams barely got a few grand until the teams with the money already enter the competition. How does that grow the game and improve the pyramid? Who wants to take that?
I think it's that we've had this continuous discussion about prize money in the FA Cup, and it has gone up. I do agree that it needs to go up even further, definitely. But I think we also have to remember that things come in stages as well. And I know we've spoken on this podcast before. Susie's advocated about where that money goes and how it's distributed, and maybe it's not being distributed right at the moment. You know, the fact that the kind of top of the pile in women's football still get more money than the bottom of the pile, and is that what the FA Cup's really about? And maybe that distribution really needs to be looked at. But I do think there is being progress made. It's a lot more money than they've ever had before. I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying it's progress.
Absolutely. Matt's also asked on X, how come the Adobe FA Cup isn't advertised as much? No TV deal in place for the first round, only until the WSL sides come in. Is it fair to ask when or if this is going to change?
It's fair to ask it for sure. And you'd like to see it change pretty rapidly. I mean, obviously the focus broadcast-wise has been on the WSL, and then, obviously the FA Cup and the League Cup sort of come after that. You know, they've not even got a title sponsor for the League Cup yet. So there's a lot of things on the WPLL's to-do list, I would say.
Yes. Indeed. But one of the things on their to-do list has been done, because the Barclays WSL announced that Sky Sports and the BBC have agreed a new 5-year shared domestic broadcast deal to show almost every WSL match live from next season. The Guardian reported the deal's worth approximately £65 million across 5 seasons, plus production costs, taking the broadcasters' total investment in the women's game to comfortably over £100 million. It's a huge increase on the current deal, which is reportedly around 7 to 8 million. I mean, that's massive. Sky Sports are going to show up to 118 live WSL matches per season. The BBC is committed to showing up to 21 matches a season live. Any matches not selected will be shown live on YouTube. Massive news for the league. Susie, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, huge news. And I think there was a little bit of tempering of expectations before, a deal was reached on, kind of the scale and scope of it. So I think it's hugely impressive given that context as well. They went into negotiations after the Premier League had just done their deal, and, that soaked up a lot of money that broadcasters had sloshing around, and was considered a bit of an error to have waited until the Premier League deal was done, which is something that, this 5-year deal is trying to avoid, and that it takes it away from the Premier League cycle a little bit. So that's a good thing. There's lots of positives, but obviously it's a long-term deal, which could look like a bargain towards the end of those 5 years. But I think, there's a big argument to say that it's, a 5-year deal gives the league, in its infancy under this new ownership, a degree of stability, right? You add that to the new Barclays sponsorship deal, and they've got a base level of income for a significant period of time as they're getting going. So, and we'll see more sponsorship deals and stuff come in. So whilst, 5 years feels like a long time, the game could change a lot in that time. It could be significantly higher at the end of that. I think, in terms of stabilizing the new ownership and giving them a base level to work with, and they've got 5 years where they don't have to hugely think about this and can focus on some of those other issues that we just mentioned of, kind of other, the FA Cup, the League Cup, those kind of stuff, as well as all of the other things that they need to deal with, refereeing, the pathway, academies, all, you name it. I think that's a good thing. I mean, what it means for there's so many questions, what it means for kick-off times and things like that. Whether any of the championship games will be picked up. They've not said that, they've said at the moment no, but it'll be an ad hoc basis. They're all big questions for the championship. If they don't get any games picked up for telly in 5 years, would be a massive, massive blow. So all of those questions still need to be answered. There's problems with it, but I think it's overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, I one detail I really like as well is that they're allowing players to use some of the broadcast clips as well for their own social media, which I think is a really progressive, smart move in terms of building the player brands, and recognises one of the key selling points of the WSL, that people really like individual players quite a lot. So I thought that was quite smart, and also a really good thing for the players themselves to be able to build their brands a bit and build their income as well, because the salaries are getting better in the WSL, but they're not, I can retire at 35 good. So I think that was a really forward-thinking and progressive move as well.
I also think it's very positive, but to pick up Suze's point about the championship, I think it's absolutely crucial that starts getting more eyes on it, gets more accessible. It's an incredible league. And at the moment, you get one game a weekend on YouTube. I think we need to get to the point where if they want to, if their plan is for YouTube to be the platform, that we need every single Barclays Championship game on YouTube as well. The clubs are recording the games, filming the games anyway. A lot of the clubs do the broadcasting themselves when they're at home. So I think that has to be the next step, because you're thinking about growing the ecosystem and the pyramid as a whole, and there has to be more eyes lower down than just the Barclays WSL. It's never going to grow if you don't get those eyes on it, and that's what the Barclays WSL did so well way back when. It's now the turn of the championship to have that kind of visibility.
Yeah, these things take time. I mean, in the men's championship, it's taken ages to try and get games. So, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. But well done to everybody involved in getting that deal over the line, because I'm sure it will have taken a lot of sleepless nights and hard work, and brilliantly exciting for women's football fans everywhere. Listen, finally, we've got an email that was sent in from Mamawaji from South Africa. Hi there, messaging in from South Africa. By the way, love the pod. It's come up many times on the pod about diversity and activism in the game across all leagues. I've noticed that Arsenal, although a very recognised and well-supported team in the WSL and across the game, they're very behind in their inclusivity in terms of racial and cultural diversity. After the current transfer window, they still haven't taken an opportunity to improve their current squad. And I'd like to know what your opinions are about this topic specifically in Arsenal's case. And they're so vocal in all issues and so eager to address these topics head on. How come the topic's gone under the radar? Tim, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I spoke to Arsenal about this about a year ago, actually, about the lack of kind of racial diversity in the squad. I think the same was true of Everton last season. They didn't have a player of colour. And there are a lot of reasons. One of them, I think, being that Arsenal had a Scandinavian manager. They heavily focused on kind of the Scandinavian market and Australian players as well. I mean, some of those players, without going into it too much, Rosa Kafaji is of Iraqi extraction, Kyra Cooney-Cross as well, has a kind of diverse background that's not immediately visible. But I spoke to James Honeyman, the academy director, and he was talking about what Arsenal are doing maybe to break out of Hertfordshire a little bit and try and attract some of that talent that we used to see at Arsenal coming from more diverse areas, particularly around North and East London. And, at the moment, to be fair, they've got Michelle Ajimang, who's on loan at Brighton, coming through, Vivian Lear coming through as well. So I do think they are making an attempt to fix it. And I do understand why there's focus on Arsenal, but I do think it's a problem across the league. I think there are a lot of squads that have got 1 to 2 players of colour in the squad who perhaps haven't had the same level of kind of scrutiny. But it's definitely an issue. And there's also work permit issues around trying to get players from Africa and areas like that. I know of a couple of targets Arsenal have had, like Temwa Chawinga, who they haven't been able to get for work permit reasons. So there are, without making out that Arsenal are totally blameless in this, there are loads and loads of reasons on it. But I wrote a piece on it about a year ago on Arsblog News, which you can find pretty easily by Googling Arsenal women lack of ethnic diversity, Arsblog News, and that's a really long read with a lot of different perspectives in it.
Brilliant stuff, Tim. Thank you. And thank you, Mamawaji, for that email as well. Don't forget, you can also have your say. Send in your questions via X or email us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. Tim, as always, lovely to see you. See you soon.
My pleasure as always. Thanks for having me.
Soph, take care. Keep warm.
I will do. Thanks for having me.
Bye, Suze.
See you later.
See you later, alligator. In a while, a crocodile. Listen, it's a reminder, as ever, for you to sign up to our bi-weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalpost, sign up. Women's Football Weekly at theguardian.com. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Joshan Chana. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Sal Ahmad.
This is The Guardian. What's that amazing smell?
It's my new Christmas Eve Yankee candle.
Wow, I love it. It takes me right back to our family Christmases.
Yeah, the smell reminds me of making Christmas pudding together with Mum. Do you remember it?
I think about that every Christmas. I hope it's as magical this year.
We'll make sure it is.
Make Christmas more magical with Yankee Candle festive fragrances. Visit yankeecandle.co.uk to explore the full range. Use code MAGICAL20 to receive 20% off full price items.
Hello, it's Kate Thornton from White Wine Question Time, and we're currently sponsored by Drambuie Scotch Whisky Liqueur, serving up a taste of the unexpected. And the unexpected is what every great dinner with friends needs. And I think I've found what I'm going to be using to shake up my next dinner with friends, the Drambuie Iced Espresso. Drambuie and espresso over ice. The perfect welcome drink or mid-course treat, and not something your guests will be expecting. For dinner with friends, choose the Drambuie Iced Espresso. Please enjoy and share Drambuie responsibly. Visit drinkaware.co.uk for more information.